People say wealthy neighborhoods are silent, that neighbors mind their own business. They are wrong. The night my stepmother beat me until my mouth tasted of copper and tears, my father just watched, and my stepbrother filmed it like I was entertainment. But across the street, a woman was watching too. While my family screamed at me to stay quiet, she dialed 3 numbers, and that single call tore their perfect little world apart. My name is Emery Powell, but right now, identity feels like a loose concept, something slipping away from me along with the sensation in my fingertips. I am just a body strapped to a stiff yellow backboard, a problem that needs to be stabilized and transported. The world has narrowed down to the claustrophobic interior of an ambulance, a box of stainless steel and blinding light. Red and blue lights wash over everything in a rhythmic, nauseating cycle. They bounce off the chrome instruments, the IV bags, and the serious, sweat-sheened forehead of the paramedic hovering over me. Every time the red light hits, the blood on his gloves looks black. When the blue hits, his face looks like a corpse. Emery? Emery, can you hear me? The voice comes from somewhere underwater. I try to nod, but my head is taped down, immobilized between 2 heavy foam blocks. A whimper escapes my throat, but it sounds wet and jagged, like it is being dragged over broken glass. "Don't try to move," the paramedic says, his voice dropping an octave, becoming firm and authoritative. He shines a penlight into my eyes. The beam stabs into my brain, triggering a pulse of agony that starts behind my left eye and radiates down my jaw. Pupils are sluggish. We need to get a line in. Carter, tell the driver to step on it. The siren wails. It is not just a sound. It is a vibration that rattles through the metal frame of the gurney and into my bones. It screams the way I wanted to scream 5 minutes ago, before the breath was knocked out of me. I close my eyes to escape the penlight, but darkness is worse. In the darkness, I am back in the living room. The memory hits me with more force than the fist did. The room is pristine, smelling of lemon polish and Shelby's expensive lavender potpourri. The ceilings are 12 feet high, drowning in the soft glow of the crystal chandelier. It is the picture of suburban perfection, and in the center of that perfection, Shelby Ross is standing over me. My stepmother. In the memory, her face is twisted into a mask I have never seen in public. Her lips are pulled back over her teeth. Her hand is raised. I can see the heavy diamond ring on her finger, the one my father bought her for their 5th anniversary, catching the light. Smack. The sound of her palm connecting with my cheek echoes in the ambulance. I flinch on the gurney, my body jerking against the restraints. "Easy, Emery, easy," the paramedic soothes, placing a hand on my shoulder. "You are safe now." But am I? The image shifts. I am on the floor of the living room, tasting copper. I look up, desperate for help. My father, Daniel, stands near the fireplace. He's holding a glass of scotch. He does not look angry. He does not look sad. He looks bored. He looks like he is watching a television program that has ceased to entertain him, but that he is too lazy to turn off. And then there is Cole. My stepbrother is standing to the left, his back to the grand piano. He is holding his phone up, the camera lens a black, unblinking eye pointed directly at my humiliation. He is not trembling. He is framing the shot. He shifts his weight, adjusting the angle to get better lighting on my split lip. "Say it again," Shelby's voice hisses in my mind, overlaying the siren. "Tell us how ungrateful you are." "Breathe, Emery, deep breath," the paramedic commands, snapping me back to the present. He is cutting the sleeve of my shirt away to find a vein. The cold air hits my skin, making me shiver. He leans in close, his eyes searching mine. He has seen trauma before. He knows the look of a car crash victim, and he knows the look of someone who has been used as a punching bag. "I need you to tell me what happened," he says, his voice low so the driver cannot hear. "This does not look like a fall. Who did this to you?" My throat feels swollen, blocked by a lump of terror that has been growing there for 6 years. The conditioning is deep. The rule is absolute. We do not talk about family business. We present a united front. We smile. If I speak, I destroy everything. If I speak, the illusion of the perfect family on Sycamore Lane shatters. I try to swallow, but it tastes like iron. I look at the paramedic. He is a stranger. He does not know that my father is a respected consultant. He does not know Shelby runs the charity gala committee. He just sees a 22-year-old woman with a face that looks like a topographic map of violence. The word comes out as a croak. Take your time, he says gently. I close my eyes again, and I see my father turning his back. I see Cole checking the footage, smirking. Got it. This is gold. They do not care if I die. The realization is cold and clarifying. To them, I am not a daughter or a sister. I am an asset that has malfunctioned. I am a problem to be managed. The anger sparks in my chest. It is a small, fragile flame, but it is enough to burn through the fear. I open my eyes. I lock gaze with the paramedic. I need him to hear me. I need to make it real. Not a stranger, I whisper. My lips are numb, making articulation difficult. Every syllable costs me. The paramedic stops prepping the IV. He leans closer. Not a stranger? My stepmother. The words hang in the sterile air between us. There. It is done. I have committed the ultimate sin of the Powell household. I have told the truth. The paramedic's expression hardens. His professional detachment shifts into something else. Protective anger. He nods once, sharp and decisive. He does not ask if I am sure. He looks at the bruising on my cheekbone, the shape of the handprint fading but still visible, and the defensive wounds on my forearms. He knows. Okay, he says, and the word sounds like a promise. We are going to take care of this. We are going to take care of you. The ambulance slows down, navigating the turn at the end of the cul-de-sac. The back doors are still open slightly as they prepare to secure the lock for the highway run. Through the square window of the rear door, the world outside is tilted and shaking. We are rolling past the manicured lawns of Sycamore Lane. The street lamps are casting long, golden shadows. It looks so peaceful. It looks so quiet. It is the kind of neighborhood where people pay millions of dollars to avoid hearing screams. And then I see her. The movement catches my eye through the glass. Across the street from my father's massive colonial house, on the porch of the smaller brick Victorian that belongs to Mrs. Rowan. The porch light is off, but the glow from the living room window behind her silhouettes her figure. She is standing right at the edge of the railing. She is wearing her nightgown, clutching a shawl around her shoulders against the night chill. She is not looking at the ambulance. She is looking at my house. In her hand, pressed tight against her chest, is a phone. Our eyes do not meet. She cannot see me inside the dark cavern of the ambulance, but I see her, for years. Mrs. Rowan was just the lady who waved when I took the trash out. She was the one who frowned when Cole revved his engine too loud. She was a part of the scenery, another silent witness to the theater of my life. But tonight, she broke the script. While my father watched me bleed, and while my stepbrother turned my pain into content, Mrs. Rowan did the one thing no one else would do. She did not close her blinds. She did not turn up the television. She picked up the phone and dialed 3 numbers. Tears prick at the corners of my eyes, hot and stinging, mixing with the blood drying on my temple. It is not the pain that makes me cry. It is the relief. It is the overwhelming, crushing weight of validation. I am not crazy. It really happened. Someone saw it. Mrs. Rowan stands there like a sentinel, a guardian angel in a floral housecoat. She stays on the porch, even as the police cruisers begin to swarm the driveway of my father's house, their lights splashing chaotic colors against the white pillars. She is watching to make sure I get away. The paramedic follows my gaze for a second, seeing the woman on the porch, then looks back at me. He places the oxygen mask over my face. "Just breathe, Emery," he says. "You are out of there." The driver hits the gas. The ambulance lurches forward. The rear doors slam shut with a heavy, final thud, sealing me inside. The view of Sycamore Lane is cut off instantly. The image of Mrs. Rowan, the flashing police lights, and the facade of my father's perfect life disappears. The last thing I saw before the doors closed was the front door of my house opening, light spilling out onto the driveway where the party guests were beginning to spill out, confused and holding their champagne flutes, wondering why the police were ruining their evening. Let them wonder, let them stare. I inhale the cool, manufactured oxygen. It tastes like plastic, but it fills my lungs. My ribs scream in protest, but I keep breathing. The silence of the neighborhood has been broken. The siren wails again, louder this time, announcing to the entire city that the secrets of the Powell family are bleeding out into the open. I am Emery Powell. I am 22 years old, and for the first time in my life, I am not protecting them. The ambulance picks up speed, rushing toward the hospital, leaving the wreckage of my former life in the rearview mirror. I close my eyes, and the rhythm of the siren sounds less like a scream and more like a heartbeat. Mine, still beating, Ridgeview, Colorado, is the kind of place where the grass is not just a plant, it is a religion. If you drive down Sycamore Lane at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, you will not see people. You will see landscaping trucks. You will see men in neon vests blowing invisible specks of dust off driveways that cost more than most college tuitions. It is a neighborhood designed to look like a postcard from the 1950s, but with better dental work and higher property taxes. Silence is the primary export here. We do not have arguments in Ridgeview. We have discussions behind triple-paned, soundproof glass. We do not have problems. We have situations that are handled by lawyers and publicists. To understand how I ended up on that stretcher with a split lip, you have to understand the architecture of my erasure. It did not happen overnight. You do not wake up one morning as the family servant. It happens by degrees, like the slow cooling of a house when the furnace breaks in winter. You do not notice the cold until you can see your own breath. I was 15 years old when the silence first moved into our house. Before that, there was noise. There was my mother playing classic rock on the kitchen stereo while she burned cookies. There was my father laughing, a deep, booming sound that used to make the floorboards vibrate. We were a triad. We were solid. Then the cancer came. It was aggressive and rude, and it ate through our happiness in 6 months flat. When my mother died, she took all the sound in the world with her. My father, Daniel Powell, did not know how to grieve. He was a man built for boardrooms and quarterly projections. He approached emotions the way he approached a failing stock. He cut his losses and restructured. He stopped saying her name. He packed her clothes into boxes the weekend after the funeral and had them hauled away by a charity truck. He stopped looking at me, I think, because I had her eyes. When he did look at me, it was with a distant, glazed expression, as if I were a smudge on a window he could not quite wipe clean. For 1 year, we lived like ghosts haunting the same hallway. I ate cereal for dinner. He drank scotch in his study. Then came the restructuring. He brought Shelby Ross home on a Tuesday in April. I remember the date because it was raining, and she walked into our foyer without getting a single drop of water on her beige trench coat. She was beautiful. There is no denying that. Shelby was beautiful in a sharp, curated way. Her blonde hair was a helmet of expensive highlights, immobile and perfect. Her smile was bright enough to signal aircraft. She filled the empty space in the hallway with a perfume that smelled like expensive vanilla and ambition. "You must be Emery," she said, extending a hand with a manicure so fresh it looked wet. She did not hug me. She shook my hand like we were closing a deal. "Your father talks about you all the time." It was the first lie she ever told me. My father had not talked about me in 12 months. But my father, he was beaming. For the first time since the funeral, the gray cast was gone from his skin. He looked alive. He looked hungry. He held Shelby by the waist, as if she were a trophy he had just won. And in a way, she was. She was the signal to the world that Daniel Powell was back in business. 2 weeks later, she moved in, and she brought Cole. Cole was 16, a year older than me. and he took up space the way a gas expands to fill a room. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and had the kind of lazy, heavy-lidded handsomeness that makes high school girls giggle and teachers offer extensions on homework. Shelby introduced him not as her son, but as an event. "This is Cole," she announced, her hand resting on his bicep. "The scouts are already looking at him. He is going to be the star of the varsity team next year. We are going to need to clear some shelf space for the trophies." She laughed, a tinkling, musical sound. My father laughed with her. I stood there, wearing my mother's old oversized cardigan, feeling like a formatting error in a beautiful document. The violence did not start with fists. If Shelby had hit me in those early days, I might have fought back. I might have told my father. Instead, she used something far more effective. She used logistics. It started with the bedrooms. 1 month after they moved in, Shelby sat me down at the kitchen island. She had made herbal tea. She pushed a mug toward me, her face arranged into a mask of sympathetic concern. "Emery, sweetie," she began, "we need to talk about the room situation. Cole creates, well, he is a growing boy. He has all that sports equipment, the weights, the gear. Your room has that lovely walk-in closet and the southern exposure. It just makes sense, spatially, for him to be in there. My room, the room my mother had painted a soft yellow, the room where I had cried myself to sleep every night for a year. But that is my room," I said. "Oh, I know," Shelby said, her voice dropping to a whisper, as if we were conspirators. "And I told Daniel you would be so understanding. You are the mature one, Emery. You are not like other teenagers who throw fits over silly things. You are practically a woman grown. I knew you would want Cole to feel welcome." There it was, the trap, mature. If I refused, I was a child throwing a fit. If I agreed, I was the mature, welcoming daughter. I looked at my father, who was reading the Wall Street Journal at the table. He did not look up. He was leaving the domestic management to his new partner. "Okay," I said. By the weekend, I was moved into the guest room down the hall. It was smaller, facing the north, always a little chilly. My mother's yellow paint was replaced by Cole's posters and the smell of gym socks. That was the beginning of the displacement. Shelby was a master of the slow nudge. She nudged me out of the conversations at dinner. She would ask Cole about practice, about his stats, about the girls chasing him. They would laugh and banter. When I tried to speak, to talk about my English essay or the art club, Shelby would smile a tight, patient smile, the kind you give a toddler interrupting an adult conversation, and say, "That is nice, Emery. Oh, Daniel, did I tell you what the club president said today?" She nudged me out of the frame. I remember the Christmas card photo that first year. We were all dressed in matching burgundy sweaters. Shelby's idea. The photographer was posing us in front of the fireplace. "Okay, squeeze in," the photographer said. Shelby stood in the middle, seated on the ottoman, radiating elegance. My father stood behind her, hand on her shoulder. Cole stood next to my father, tall and imposing, holding a basketball because Shelby thought it added character. "Emery, honey," Shelby said, not turning her head, her smile fixed for the lens. "You are blocking the light on Cole. Just take a step back, a little more to the side. Perfect." When the cards were printed and mailed to 300 of their closest friends, I was there, but I was blurry. I was half-shadowed by the Christmas tree, standing on the periphery, looking at the floor. If you did not know the family had a daughter, you might have thought I was a neighbor who had wandered into the shot by mistake. The neighbors in Ridgeview, however, saw what they wanted to see. They saw the handsome Daniel Powell and his stunning new wife. They saw the athletic stepson. And they saw me, the quiet girl in the background. "They are such a lovely family," I heard Mrs. Gable say at the grocery store. "And Shelby has done wonders for that house. Daniel looks 10 years younger." Nobody asked how I was doing. As the months turned into 2 years, my role shifted from daughter to staff. It was subtle. It was phrased as praise. "Emery is so organized," Shelby would tell the women at her book club. gesturing to the tray of appetizers I was serving. "I do not know what I would do without her. She manages the entire household schedule. She is my right hand." It was true. I did manage the schedule. I made sure the dry cleaning was picked up. I grocery shopped because Shelby was too overwhelmed with her charity work. I ironed Daniel's shirts because Shelby said the cleaning service ruined the collars. I cooked dinner 5 nights a week because Cole needed proper nutrition, and Shelby was often on a diet of white wine and celery sticks. I became the invisible friction reducer of the house. I greased the gears of their lives so they could spin effortlessly. If I complained, if I said I had homework, or I wanted to go to a movie with a friend, the mood in the house would curdle instantly. Shelby would sigh, a long, tragic exhale. She would rub her temples. "I suppose I can do it," she would say, her voice trembling. I have such a migraine coming on, and with the gala planning, but no, you go have fun. Emery, do not worry about us." And then my father would look up, his brows furrowing. "Emery, help Shelby. Do not be difficult." Difficult, the opposite of mature. So I stayed. I cooked the pasta. I separated the recycling. I faded into the beige wallpaper. But there was one person who seemed to notice the fading. Mrs. Rowan lived directly across the street in a brick Victorian that looked out of place among the modern neo-colonials. She was a widow, retired from something academic, history. I think she spent her days gardening with a ferocity that bordered on combat. I would see her when I dragged the heavy trash bins to the curb on Tuesday nights. Cole was supposed to do it, but he was always too tired from practice. Mrs. Rowan would be on her porch, pruning her roses or sweeping invisible dust. She would stop and watch me struggle with the bins. She never waved in that cheery, fake suburban way. She just watched. One evening, a crisp October twilight, I was sweeping leaves off the driveway. My father's BMW was parked in the garage, gleaming. Shelby's SUV was next to it. I had been working for an hour, my hands blistering on the rake handle. I looked up and saw Mrs. Rowan standing by her mailbox. She was looking at me, and then she looked at the living room window of my house. Through the glass, you could see the flicker of the 60-inch television. You could see Cole laughing, throwing popcorn into his mouth. You could see Shelby pouring wine for my father. Mrs. Rowan looked back at me. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes were sharp. She took a step toward the curb, her mouth opening slightly, as if she had a sentence prepared. I froze. A part of me wanted her to speak. A part of me wanted someone, anyone, to say, "This is not right." But then the front door opened. "Emery," Shelby's voice rang out, sweet and piercing. "Honey, are you done yet? Cole needs his jersey washed for tomorrow. Make sure you use the stain remover." I flinched. The moment broke. Mrs. Rowan closed her mouth. She gave a small, almost imperceptible shake of her head, not at me, but at the situation, and turned back to her walkway. "Coming?" I called back. I finished the leaves. I went inside. I washed the jersey. I made the dinner. I cleaned the dishes. That night, lying in the guest room that was now permanently mine, listening to the silence of the house, I tried to convince myself that this was okay. At least they aren't yelling. I told myself, at least Dad is happy. At least we look like a family. I told myself that silence was the price of stability. I told myself that being useful was the same thing as being loved. I told myself that if I just worked hard enough, if I was quiet enough, if I was mature enough, eventually they would see me again. I was wrong. They saw me just fine. They saw a resource. They saw a mule. And you do not thank a mule for carrying the load. You just pile more on until its back breaks. I turned over and looked out the window. Across the street, the light in Mrs. Rowan's window was still on. It was a steady yellow square in the darkness. I watched it until my eyelids grew heavy, a lone beacon in a sea of manicured, indifferent darkness. Anywhere you go, it is the same story. Silence is what keeps the peace. Or at least, that is what I thought back then. I did not know yet that silence is actually just a container where the pressure builds, day after day, until the explosion is inevitable. The transition from high school to adulthood is supposed to be a liberation. It is supposed to be the moment you cut the cord, pack your cheap IKEA furniture into a hatchback, and go make terrible decisions that are entirely your own. But in the Powell household, adulthood was not a door opening. It was a lease renewal on my servitude. Only this time, the terms were far more expensive. When the acceptance letter from the state university arrived, I felt a spark of hope. It was a ticket out. It was a promise of dorm rooms, bad cafeteria food, and 300 miles of distance between me and Shelby's lavender-scented tyranny. That spark lasted exactly 6 hours. Dinner that night was an ambush disguised as a celebration. Shelby poured sparkling cider into crystal flutes. My father sat at the head of the table, looking grave and serious, the way he did when discussing market volatility. "We are so proud of you, Emery," Shelby said, placing a hand over mine. Her skin was cool and dry. "Getting in is a huge accomplishment, but your father and I have been looking at the numbers." "The numbers? It always came down to the numbers." "The market has been unstable," my father said, cutting his steak with surgical precision. "And with Cole starting his recruitment tour next year, the expenses are going to be significant. We have to be strategic." "We think," Shelby interjected, her voice smooth as syrup, "that the community college here in Ridgeview is the smarter play. For the first 2 years, at least, you can live at home. We will convert the guest room into a proper study space for you. Think of the money we will save on room and board. It is the responsible choice." They did not ask me. They presented it as a fait accompli. The logic was sound, impenetrable, and suffocating. If I argued, I was being selfish. If I insisted on leaving, I was draining the family resources that were needed for Cole's future. So, the acceptance letter went into the recycling bin. I enrolled at Ridgeview Community College. I stayed in the guest room, and the invisible walls around me grew 10 feet taller. But staying home was not enough. 1 week before classes started, Shelby walked into my room without knocking. She was holding a brochure for Northgate Fieldworks, a logistics and data processing firm on the edge of town. "I made a few calls," she said, dropping the brochure on my bed. "They have an opening in data entry. It is part-time, flexible hours. I got you an interview for Tuesday." "I was planning to focus on my classes," I said, looking at the glossy paper. "Nonsense," Shelby smiled. "Work ethic is just as important as grades. Plus, it will look excellent on your CV. Employers want to see that you can balance responsibilities. And of course, you will want to contribute to the household now that you are an adult. It is only fair." The interview was a formality. Shelby knew the HR manager from her charity circle. I got the job. I spent my afternoons in a gray cubicle, typing shipping codes into a legacy database until my eyes blurred. The first payday was a Friday. I held the check in my hand, feeling a strange, foreign sense of pride. $340. It was not a fortune, but it was mine. When I got home, Shelby was waiting in the kitchen. She had a binder open on the granite island. "Let's get this set up," she said, gesturing to a laptop. "Set what up?" I asked. "Your financial structure," she said, typing rapidly. "You are young, Emery. You do not know how to manage assets. If you keep that money, you will spend it on coffee and clothes and have nothing to show for it in 5 years. Your father and I have set up a high-yield savings account for you. It is a family trust fund mechanism." She turned the screen to show me a graph that went up and to the right. "You deposit your checks here," she explained. "We manage the portfolio. By the time you graduate, you will have a nest egg. We will handle your expenses, gas, food, essentials, from the family account. This way, your money grows." It sounded smart. It sounded like they were looking out for me. I was 18. I had never balanced a checkbook. I trusted them. I signed the direct deposit form. That was the moment I ceased to be a daughter and became an indentured servant. For the next 3 years, Every dollar I earned at Northgate Fieldworks bypassed my pocket entirely and vanished into the black hole of Shelby's accounting. I worked 20 hours a week during the semester and 40 hours a week during the summer. I did the math in my head once. Over 3 years, I had generated nearly $30,000 of income. And yet, I had to ask permission to buy deodorant. The system was diabolical in its simplicity. Because I had no money of my own, I had to ask Shelby for everything, and Shelby made every request a negotiation of my worth. "You need new jeans?" she would ask, eyeing my frayed cuffs. "Didn't we just buy you a pair last winter? Emery, you need to learn to take care of your things. Money does not grow on trees." But apparently, it did grow on trees for Cole. Cole did not work. Cole practiced. He played video games. He went to parties. And yet, packages arrived for him almost daily. I remember one Tuesday in November. I had just come home from a 6-hour shift at the data center. My back ached, and I was wearing boots that had a hole in the sole, letting the freezing rain seep into my socks. There was a large cardboard box on the kitchen table. Cole was tearing it open with a steak knife. Inside was a pair of limited edition basketball sneakers. They were neon green and black. I knew what they were because I had heard Cole talking about them for weeks. They cost $250. "Sick," Cole said, holding one up. "These are going to look insane on the court." "They fit?" Shelby asked, looking up from her magazine. I had to outbid 3 people on eBay to get that size. I stood in the doorway, feeling the cold water squish in my boot. $250. That was nearly my entire week's paycheck. "I thought we were cutting back," I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the room. Shelby turned to me, her face hardening instantly. "Excuse me?" "My boots are leaking," I said, lifting my foot. "You said I couldn't get new ones because the budget was tight, but those shoes cost 10 times what a pair of boots would cost." Shelby sighed. It was the sigh of a martyr dealing with a simpleton. "Emery, do not be petty," she said. "Cole is an athlete. His footwear is equipment. It is an investment in his scholarship potential. Your boots are functional. Duct tape is 50 cents. Use your head." "It is not about the boots," I said, the frustration rising in my throat. "It is about the money. I earned that money. Why does he get to spend it?" The room went silent. Cole stopped admiring his shoe and looked at me with a mixture of amusement and pity. Shelby stood up. She walked over to me and placed a hand on my cheek. It was a gesture that looked affectionate from a distance, but felt like a threat up close. "It is not your money, Emery," she whispered. "It is the family's money. We feed you. We house you. We are building your future nest egg. Do you have any idea what rent costs in this town? Do you know what utilities cost? You are contributing a fraction of what you consume. At your age, sacrifice is normal. You should be grateful we do not charge you rent." She patted my cheek. "Now, be a dear and break down that box for the recycling, and start dinner. Daniel wants the roast tonight." I broke down the box. I cooked the roast. I taped my boot. But that night, I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling, and the fog began to lift. I started to look at the situation not as a daughter, but as an accountant. I was not saving money by living at home. I was a revenue stream. I was an unpaid housekeeper, a chef, a personal assistant, and a source of income from my outside job. I was generating value for the Powell Corporation, and in return, I was receiving room and board that I had no equity in. I did not have a bank account. I did not have a credit score. I did not have a car title in my name. The old sedan I drove to work was in my father's name. If I tried to leave tomorrow, I would walk out with the clothes on my back and $0 to my name. I was 21 years old, and I was financially non-existent. The realization was cold and sharp, like swallowing a jagged piece of ice. They had not just taken my room, they had taken my autonomy. They had built a golden cage where the bars were made of family obligation and financial responsibility. The next morning, I walked out to the car to go to work. Across the street, Mrs. Rowan was sweeping her porch. She stopped when she saw me. She leaned on her broom. her eyes tracking me as I limped slightly in my taped boot. Usually, neighbors would smile and say, "Off to work? Such a hard worker." The neighborhood loved the narrative of Emery Powell. I was the good girl, the sensible one, the one who stayed home to help her family. I heard it all the time at the grocery store. "You are such a blessing to Shelby," Mrs. Gable would say. "Most girls your age are off partying, but you are so grounded." They saw a dutiful daughter. They did not see a hostage. But Mrs. Rowan was different. She did not smile. She looked at the duct tape on my boot. Then she looked at the brand new BMW SUV parked in our driveway, Shelby's new lease. She looked back at my face. Her eyes narrowed. It was a look of recognition. She took a step toward the edge of her property. For a second, I thought she was going to wave me over. I wanted her to. I wanted to scream across the asphalt, "Help me. I am drowning in plain sight." But Cole came out the front door, dribbling his basketball. "Yo, Em, you blocked me in," he yelled, spinning the ball on his finger. "Move your piece of junk. I have practice." Mrs. Rowan stiffened. She watched Cole, noticing the fresh neon sneakers on his feet. Then she looked back at my taped boot. She saw the math. She did not say anything. She just nodded to me, a slow, solemn dip of her chin. It was an acknowledgement. I see it. I got into the car. I moved it so the Prince of Sycamore Lane could back out. As I drove to Northgate Fieldworks to earn another $100 I would never see, I realized that Mrs. Rowan was the only person in the world who realized that the ideal family across the street was actually a sweatshop with a very nice lawn. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The sadness I had felt for years was hardening into something else. It was turning into calculation. Shelby was right about one thing. I needed to learn about finance. I needed to learn exactly how much they owed me, and I needed to figure out how to collect. But for now, I was just the employee, the staff, the girl who didn't exist on paper. I drove past the bank where my nest egg was supposedly growing, and for the first time, I didn't just wonder if the money was there. I knew, with a sinking, terrible certainty, that the account was empty. I just didn't have the proof yet. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday, sandwiched between a catalog for luxury patio furniture and a bill for my father's country club membership. It was heavy, made of thick, cream-colored cardstock that felt like fabric under my fingertips. The return address was embossed in raised black ink. Halpern and Associates, attorneys at law. I stood by the mailbox, the metal cold against my hip, and felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the wind. I knew that name. Arthur Halpern had been my mother's lawyer. He was a man who smelled of peppermint and old leather, who used to give me butterscotch candies when I waited in his lobby while my mother signed papers. I had not seen him in 7 years, not since the funeral. I slipped the envelope under my sweater, pressing it against my stomach. Instinct told me to hide it. In the Powell house, anything that was yours eventually became theirs, especially if it had value. I waited until I was safe in the anonymity of a coffee shop 3 blocks away before I opened it. My hands were trembling so much I nearly tore the letter inside. It was a summons, polite but formal. Mr. Halpern needed to see me immediately regarding the estate of Margaret Powell. I went straight there. I did not call Shelby to ask for permission. I did not tell my father I would be late starting dinner. I drove my father's old sedan to the brick building downtown, took the elevator to the 4th floor, and walked into a room that felt like a time capsule. Mr. Halpern looked older. His hair was entirely white now, and the lines around his eyes had deepened, but the warmth was the same. When he saw me, he stood up and came around his massive mahogany desk, taking both my hands in his. "Emery," he said softly, "you look so much like her." That single sentence nearly broke me. In my house, looking like my mother was a crime punishable by silence. Here, it was a benediction. We sat down. He opened a thick file folder. "Your mother was a very smart woman, Emery," he began, his voice grave. "And she was a woman who observed things. Before she passed, she was worried. She saw changes in Daniel, She saw the direction things might go. He slid a document across the desk. It was titled, The Emery Powell Living Trust. She set this up 3 months before she died, Mr. Halpern explained. She liquidated her personal assets, money she inherited from her own parents, money she made from her consulting work that she never commingled with your father's accounts, and most importantly, she placed her 15% equity stake in Blue Cedar Analytics into this trust. My breath hitched. Blue Cedar Analytics. I knew that name. It was a tech firm that had gone public 2 years ago. It was massive. 15%? I whispered. It is a significant sum, Emery, Mr. Halpern said, and it has been growing, untouched, for 7 years. But here is the key. Your mother placed strict conditions on it. Your father knows the trust exists, but he believes it is a small educational fund that dried up years ago. He does not know about the stock, and he does not know about the trigger clause. He tapped a paragraph on the 3rd page. This is the protective provision. The trust was designed to unlock fully when you turn 25. However, your mother added a hardship clause. If you are subjected to documented abuse, coercion, or financial duress that threatens your well-being, the trust activates immediately. It grants you sole, unrestricted access to all funds and assets, bypassing any other trustees. It effectively emancipates you financially from anyone trying to control you. I stared at the words, documented abuse, financial duress. Tears blurred my vision. 7 years ago, while she was dying, while her body was failing her, my mother was thinking about this. She was looking into a future she would never see, predicting the coldness of my father and the vulnerability of her daughter. And she had built me a lifeboat. She had not just left me money, she had left me a way out. She knew, I said, my voice cracking. She knew they would trap me. She hoped they wouldn't, Mr. Halpern corrected gently, but she prepared for the possibility that they would. She wanted you to have a key, Emery, a key to your own life. He handed me a smaller envelope. She left this for you, to be read when you found out. I opened it. The handwriting was shaky, the script of a woman who was losing her strength but not her resolve. My darling Emery, if you are reading this, things have been hard. I am so sorry I could not be there to shield you. But know this, you are not their servant. You are not their shadow. You are the sun. Do not let them dim you. Use this to build a life that makes you happy. I love you, more than there are stars in the sky. Mom. I wept. I sat in that leather chair and cried until my chest ached. It was a release of grief I had been holding back since I was 15. For an hour, I wasn't the housekeeper or the scapegoat. I was a daughter who was loved. But reality has a way of crashing the party. As I gathered the documents to leave, Mr. Halpern's expression turned serious. He leaned forward, his eyes locking onto mine. Emery, listen to me closely. This kind of money changes people. If your father, or his wife, finds out about the liquid value of this trust before you are ready to leave, things will get dangerous. They will not see this as your property. They will see it as a lost asset that belongs to the family. People who feel entitled do not accept the word no. I won't tell them. I promised. Be careful, he said. The clause requires proof. If things escalate, you need to be ready. I walked out of the office clutching the folder to my chest like a shield. The sun was setting, casting long, bloody streaks across the sky. I felt different, heavier, yet stronger. I had a secret, and for the first time, I had power. I drove home, my mind racing. I needed to hide the papers. I would put them in the hollow space behind the loose baseboard in my closet, the one place Shelby never looked because she never cleaned. I pulled into the driveway on Sycamore Lane. The house loomed large and white, like a mausoleum. Mrs. Rowan was there. She was standing by her front gate, holding a watering can, though the flowers were already damp. She watched me get out of the car. She saw the folder tucked under my arm. She did not wave. She did not smile. She looked at the folder, then up at my face, and her brow furrowed. It was a look of profound anxiety. It was as if she could see the target painted on my back. She shifted her weight, looking toward my front door, then back at me, her eyes pleading with me to be careful. I gave her a tiny, almost imperceptible nod and hurried toward the house. I almost made it. I was halfway to the stairs, intending to run to my room, when my father walked out of his study. He was holding a glass of scotch. He looked tired. He looked right at me, and then his eyes dropped to the folder in my hand. "What is that?" he asked. "Nothing," I said, too quickly. "Just some paperwork from school." "School paperwork doesn't come on legal bond," he said. He took a step closer. "Let me see." "It is private," I said, clutching it tighter. "Private?" Shelby's voice drifted in from the living room. She appeared in the doorway, holding a glass of Chardonnay. She looked at the tension in my shoulders, and her radar went off. "Nothing in this family is private. Emery, we are an open book. What are you hiding?" My father reached out. I tried to pull back, but he was faster. He snatched the folder from my grip. My heart stopped. He opened it. He scanned the first page. I saw his eyes widen. I saw the color drain from his face and then rush back in a flush of red. "Halpern," he muttered. "The trust. I thought this was empty." He flipped the page. He saw the numbers. He saw the words, Blue Cedar Analytics, and 15%. The silence in the hallway was absolute. It was the silence of a bomb right before the timer hit 0. Shelby walked over to him. She looked over his shoulder. I watched her eyes scan the document. I watched the transformation happen in real time. Her boredom vanished. Her annoyance vanished. Her pupils dilated. She licked her lips, a purely predatory reflex. 15%? She whispered. Her voice was breathless, almost reverent. "Daniel, do you have any idea what that stock is trading at right now? That is millions." She looked at me. For years, Shelby had looked at me with disdain, with pity, with annoyance, but she had never looked at me like this. She was looking at me the way a butcher looks at a prize steer. She was calculating the yield. "Emery, honey," she said, and the sudden sweetness in her voice was more terrifying than any shout. "Why didn't you tell us? This is wonderful news for the family." "It is my mother's," I said, my voice shaking but stubborn. "It is for me." My father looked up from the paper. His eyes were cold, hard flint. He did not look like a father proud of his daughter's inheritance. He looked like a CEO who had just discovered an embezzlement scheme. "It is family assets," he said. "It was generated while she was my wife. It belongs to the estate." "It is in my name," I said. "Mr. Halpern said—" "Mr. Halpern is a senile old bat," Shelby interrupted. Stepping closer to me, she reached out and touched my arm. Her fingers dug in, just a little too hard. "We will sort this out, sweetie. We will call our lawyers in the morning and figure out how to manage this properly. You are too young to handle this kind of responsibility. You would just get taken advantage of." I pulled my arm away. "I am 22. I can handle it." Shelby smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. "We will discuss it at dinner. Go wash up." My father kept the folder. He turned and walked back into his study, closing the door. I stood alone in the hallway. The air felt thin. The safety I had felt in Halpern's office was gone, replaced by a sickening dread. They knew. They knew the number. They smelled the money. I went upstairs to my room, my hands shaking. I walked to the window and looked out. Across the street, Mrs. Rowan was still there. It was dark now, but she was standing under the street lamp, looking up at my window. She had not moved. She knew something had happened. She could feel the shift in the atmosphere. I pressed my hand against the cold glass. My mother had given me a key to freedom, but in doing so, she had inadvertently started the countdown. Halpern was right. They would not accept no. The storm wasn't coming anymore. It was here, and I was trapped in the house with two people who would tear me apart to get to the gold inside my veins. The summons to the dining room table came on a Thursday evening, 2 days after the discovery of the trust. It was framed not as an interrogation, but as a family conference in the Powell household. Euphemisms were the primary language. We did not have fights. We had realignments. We did not have victims. We had contributors. I walked into the dining room to find the stage already set. My father sat at the head of the table, a legal pad and a calculator arranged neatly before him next to a tumbler of amber liquid. Shelby sat to his right, her posture rigid, her hands clasped on top of the table like a schoolgirl waiting for a lesson. Cole was there too, slumped in a chair, scrolling through his phone, looking bored but present. The folder, my folder, the one containing my mother's legacy, sat in the center of the table. It looked small against the dark mahogany, but it pulled the gravity of the room toward it like a black hole. "Sit down, Emery," my father said. His voice was calm, reasonable, the voice he used when he was about to sell a client on a bad deal. I sat. I kept my hands in my lap to hide the fact that they were shaking. "We have been reviewing the documents," Daniel began, tapping the folder with a manicured fingernail. "And we have been doing some thinking about the future. Not just your future, but the family's future. You know, Emery, wealth is a tool. But like any tool, it is useless if it sits in a box gathering dust. It needs to be deployed strategically." "It is a trust fund," I said, my voice tight. "Mr. Halpern said it is for my security." Shelby sighed, a soft, fluttering sound. She reached across the table, her fingers inching toward mine, though she did not quite touch me. "Emery, honey," she said, her voice dripping with a synthetic sweetness that made my skin crawl. "We understand that you feel protective. That is natural. But you have to understand the bigger picture. You are part of a unit, a family unit. When one of us succeeds, we all succeed. And right now, the family has a critical need." She paused for effect, looking at Cole. "Cole is entering the most important 6 months of his life," she continued. "The recruitment scouts are coming to every game. They are looking at his stats, yes, but they are also looking at the package, the image. They want to see a winner. They want to see a young man who commands respect." I looked at Cole. He was wearing a hoodie that cost $300, looking at a meme on Instagram. He commanded about as much respect as a wet napkin. "Okay," I said cautiously. "What does that have to do with me?" Daniel cleared his throat. "The minivan Shelby has been driving him in is tired. It sends the wrong message. We need to upgrade. We have been looking at the new BMW X5. It is strong, safe, and it projects the right kind of stability." I stared at him. "You want to buy a car?" "We want us to acquire a vehicle for Cole's use," Daniel corrected. "But my liquidity is currently tied up in the market correction, and Shelby's capital is allocated to the house renovations. You, however, are sitting on a significant liquid asset." The room seemed to tilt. They wanted me to buy my stepbrother a luxury car, a car that cost more than 4 years of tuition at the university they told me I could not afford. "You want me to pay for it," I said. It wasn't a question. "We want you to invest in your brother," Shelby said, her eyes widening with hurt innocent. "Think of it as a loan if you must. Though in families, we prefer not to use such transactional terms. It is about support. Cole is going to the NBA one day. This is just seed money." "The trust is for my life," I said. I felt the anger rising, hot and suffocating. "It is for when I move out, for when I finish school. What about my future? I am driving a 15-year-old sedan with a broken heater." Shelby's face crumpled. It was a performance worthy of an award. Her lower lip trembled, and a single tear managed to escape her right eye. "How can you be so selfish?" she whispered. "After everything we have done for you? We took you in. We raised you. We put a roof over your head for years without asking for a dime in rent. We fed you. We clothed you. And the moment you get a little bit of luck, you hoard it like a dragon, while your brother needs help?" "I work," I said, my voice rising. "I give you my paycheck, every week." Pocket change, Daniel snapped. The calm mask slipped for a second. Do you have any idea what the mortgage on this house is? Your little checks barely cover the electric bill. You have been subsidized by this family for your entire adult life. Emery, it is time to balance the ledger. Cole looked up from his phone. He chewed on the inside of his cheek, looking at me with a mix of annoyance and entitlement. Just buy the car, Emery, he said, as casually as if he were asking me to pass the salt. You owe us. Mom says you would be homeless if it wasn't for Dad. Besides, I'll let you drive it sometimes, if you ask. I owe you nothing, I said. The words hung in the air, shocking in their clarity. Daniel slammed his hand down on the table. The silverware rattled. You owe us respect, he roared, and you owe us compliance. That money came from your mother, who was my wife. It was generated during our marriage. Morally, it is mine. Legally, it might be in your name due to a loophole, but if you have a shred of decency, you will do what is right for this family. The answer is no, I said. I stood up to leave. Shelby stopped crying instantly. Her face went cold and hard, like concrete setting. We will see about that, she said softly. That night was the beginning of the siege. They did not hit me, not yet. They knew that bruises were evidence. Instead, they launched a psychological offensive designed to erode my sanity. It started with the brochures. When I woke up the next morning, there was a glossy BMW pamphlet on my pillow. It was open to the page featuring the model they wanted. In carbon black metallic, a sticky note was attached in Shelby's handwriting. This one has the safety features Cole needs. We knew you would want him to be safe. I threw it in the trash. When I went to the kitchen to make coffee, the browser on the family iPad was left open to the configuration page for the car. The price was circled in red marker on the screen, $72,000. When I came home from work, Daniel was in the living room, talking loudly on the phone to a dealership. Yes, my daughter will be down on Saturday to sign the papers, he was saying, looking directly at me as I walked through the door. She is very excited to help her brother. It is a gift. He hung up and smiled at me. It was a shark smile. They are holding it for us until the weekend. Don't embarrass me, Emery. The pressure was relentless. It was in the air I breathed. At dinner, Shelby would serve Cole a steak and slide a plate of plain boiled pasta toward me. We are cutting back on expenses, she would say, pouring herself a glass of wine. Since we have to save up for the car ourselves, apparently, some of us have to sacrifice. Cole would smirk and cut into his meat. Thanks for the sacrifice, Em. Every conversation was a trap. If I spoke, I was interrupted. If I stayed silent, I was accused of sulking. They gaslit me systematically. You remember when you broke that vase when you were 10? Shelby asked one evening. It was an antique. Your father forgave you. He never asked for repayment. And now, when he asks for one small thing, I didn't break a vase, I said. The cat did. See? Shelby looked at Daniel. She rewrites history to suit herself. Pathological. By Wednesday, I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. I sat in my room, the walls closing in. I looked at the bank app on my phone. I had finally forced them to give me the login for the trust, though they monitored it like hawks. The money was there. It was real, but it felt like monopoly money. Something I could see but not touch. I remembered Mr. Halpern's words. Documented abuse, coercion. I needed proof. They were smart. They never put the threats in writing. It was always spoken, always in the privacy of our home, where it was their word against mine. I went to the electronics store on my lunch break. I bought a small, high-quality voice recorder. It was the size of a stick of gum. I taped it to the underside of the dining room table. I also downloaded a recording app on my phone and set it to a shortcut on my home screen. One tap, and it would record even if the phone was locked. That evening, the attack escalated. Shelby cornered me in the laundry room. The washing machine was running, the rhythmic thumping providing a cover for her voice. She backed me up against the dryer. She was close enough that I could smell the white wine on her breath. "You are playing a dangerous game, little girl," she said. Her voice was low, devoid of the usual sugary coating. "I am just protecting what is mine," I said, my hand slipping into my pocket. I tapped the screen of my phone. Recording. "Nothing is yours," Shelby hissed. "You are a guest here, and guests can be evicted, or worse." "Is that a threat?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Shelby laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. She reached out and smoothed the collar of my shirt, her fingers lingering near my throat. "Every family has a way of dealing with the problem child," she said. "We tried to be nice. We tried to use positive reinforcement, but if you persist in this obstinance, we will have to change tactics. Unruly children need discipline, and believe me, Emery, we know exactly how to make you comply. You will sign that check, and you will smile while you do it. Because if you don't, you will wish you had never been born." She patted my cheek hard and walked out. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I pulled the phone out of my pocket. The red timer was counting up. 1 minute, 42 seconds. I had it. I had the threat. I saved the file and uploaded it immediately to a cloud account I had created at the library, one they didn't know about. I walked upstairs, my legs feeling like jelly. I went to the window, needing to see something outside of this prison. Across the street, the curtains in the brick Victorian moved. Mrs. Rowan was there. She was not gardening. She was not sweeping. She was standing just inside her window, looking directly at my house. The lights in our house were bright, exposing us like fish in a bowl. She must have seen Shelby corner me in the laundry room. The window there faced the street. She must have seen the aggression in Shelby's body language. "Mrs. Rowan's hand was raised to her mouth. Even from this distance, I could see the conflict in her posture. She took a step toward the door, then stopped. She looked at her phone, then back at my house. She was afraid. She was afraid that if she intervened, they would take it out on me. She was afraid that she was misinterpreting things. She was paralyzed by the social contract of the suburbs. Do not interfere. I pressed my hand against the glass. Don't come over. I thought, not yet. I am not ready. But I also thought, please don't stop watching. The pressure inside the house was reaching a boiling point. The deadline was Saturday. The BMW, the gift. I knew I wasn't going to buy the car, and I knew that when I refused, the polite veneer of the Powell family would finally shatter completely. I checked the recorder app again. The file was safe. "Bring it on," I whispered to the empty room. But as I lay down on the bed that wasn't really mine, in the room that wasn't really mine, I knew that the next 48 hours were going to be a nightmare. I just didn't know that the nightmare would end with flashing lights and a siren. Friday morning arrived with a sky the color of a bruised plum. The air was heavy with pending rain, matching the atmosphere inside the Powell house where silence had become a weapon. I told Shelby I had an early shift at the data center, but I drove in the opposite direction, toward the downtown district where the glass towers of the city rose like jagged teeth. My appointment with Mr. Halpern was at 8 o'clock. I parked my father's sedan 3 blocks away, paranoid that someone, Cole, perhaps, or one of Shelby's spies in the community, might see the car. I walked the rest of the way, clutching my bag against my chest. Inside, the digital recorder felt heavy, like a stone I was preparing to throw. Mr. Halpern was waiting for me. He looked different today, less like the kindly family friend, and more like the shark he was reputed to be in the courtroom. He wore a charcoal suit, and his desk was clear of everything except a legal pad and a pen. "Play it," he said, skipping the pleasantries. I placed the small device on the mahogany surface and pressed play. The sound of the washing machine filled the office, a rhythmic thumping, followed by Shelby's voice. It sounded tinny but unmistakable. "Every family has a way of dealing with the problem child. Unruly children need discipline. You will sign that check." Mr. Halpern listened, his eyes closed, his fingers steepled under his chin. He did not react to the venom in her tone. He was listening for the legal triggers. When the recording ended, he opened his eyes. They were cold and sharp. "It is good," he said, "but it is not enough, not yet." "She threatened me," I said, feeling a spike of panic. "She said I would wish I had never been born." "She used vague language," Halpern countered, his voice calm and analytical. "In a civil court, a good defense attorney, and Daniel will hire the best, will argue this was metaphorical. They will say it was parental frustration, not a genuine threat of harm. To activate the hardship clause without a long, drawn-out battle that they could drain your funds fighting, we need something absolute. We need proof of physical danger or undeniable financial theft." He leaned forward. "However, this establishes a pattern. It is the foundation. Now we build the walls." We spent the next hour strategizing. It felt less like legal counsel and more like war planning. We were plotting a coup against my own family. "Step 1 is insulation," Halpern said. "You need a perimeter they cannot breach." He directed me to a small credit union on the south side of town, a place used mostly by teachers and firefighters, far removed from the high-end banks my father frequented. "Open an account," he instructed. "Paperless, no mail to the house. Use a new email address they do not know about. If you can, siphon any money you have, cash, tips, anything into it. You need a go-bag fund." "And the trust?" I asked. "I have drafted the papers to trigger the hardship clause," he said, tapping a thick stack of documents in his drawer. "They are ready to file at a moment's notice. The second they cross the line from pressure to force, we pull the trigger. But Emery, you have to be the one to endure the pressure until then. You cannot snap. You cannot give them a reason to paint you as unstable." "I can handle it," I said, though my stomach twisted. "They are going to escalate," Halpern warned. "When the deadline for the car comes and you say no, the gloves will come off. Be ready." I left his office and went straight to the credit union. Opening the account took 20 minutes. Holding the temporary debit card in my hand felt illicit. It was a small rectangle of plastic, but it represented the first secret I had ever kept that was truly mine. I deposited $40, all the cash I had in my wallet. It was a pathetic sum compared to the millions in the trust, but it was the only money in the world that Shelby Ross could not touch. When I returned to Sycamore Lane, the house was empty. Shelby was at a committee lunch. Daniel was at the office. Cole was presumably at practice. I used the silence to fortify my position. I went to my room and checked the voice recorder taped under the dining table. It was still there, blinking a tiny, almost invisible red light. I added a second one, hidden behind the books on the living room shelf, right where family meetings usually happened. I was just coming back downstairs when I saw Mrs. Rowan. She was standing on the sidewalk, right at the edge of my driveway. This was unusual. Mrs. Rowan respected property lines with religious fervor. She was holding a small basket covered with a checkered cloth. I opened the front door. "Mrs. Rowan?" She jumped slightly, as if I had caught her doing something illegal. She looked at me, her eyes scanning my face, checking for bruises. "Emery," she said. Her voice was bird-like but steady. "I made scones. Blueberry. I made too many. I was wondering if you had a moment for tea? At my house?" I froze. In 6 years, I had never been inside her house. I had never been invited. "I really shouldn't," I said, looking back at the empty house. "Shelby will be home soon." "Just for 20 minutes, Mrs. Rowan pressed. There was an urgency in her eyes. "Please." I looked at the street. It was quiet. The camera Cole had set up in the garage to film his workouts was off. "Okay," I said. Entering Mrs. Rowan's house was like stepping into a different century. It smelled of dried lavender, floor wax, and old books. It was cluttered, filled with knickknacks and framed photos of people I didn't know. But it felt warm. It felt like a home, not a stage set. She poured tea into delicate china cups. We sat in her front parlor, which had a large bay window facing the street, facing my house. From here, the view was terrifying. I could see everything. I could see the window of my bedroom. I could see the living room where my father drank his scotch. I realized then that Mrs. Rowan had been watching the entire time. She wasn't just a neighbor, she was the audience to my tragedy. "I hear them," she said suddenly. She didn't touch her tea. "The walls on these old houses are thick, but the windows— sound carries on Sycamore Lane. I hear him yelling. I hear her. That tone she uses." I stared at my tea, the steam rising in a lazy spiral. It is just family stress, the wedding season, the recruitment. "Don't," Mrs. Rowan said sharply. She reached out and placed her hand over mine. Her skin was like parchment paper, dry and thin, but her grip was surprisingly strong. "Don't give me the script, Emery. I have lived on this street for 40 years. I saw your mother. I saw how you were before, and I see what you are now. You are disappearing." The truth rose in my throat, hot and acidic. I wanted to deny it. I wanted to protect the lie because the lie was safe. But looking at this woman, with her kind, worried eyes, I couldn't do it. "They want me to buy Cole a car," I whispered. "A BMW. They are trying to make me sign over my inheritance." Mrs. Rowan exhaled a long, shaky breath. "Financial abuse. It is the quiet kind. The kind people don't call the police for." "I don't have access to my own money," I confessed, the words tumbling out now that the dam had broken. "I have to ask for gas money. I have to ask for tampons. And now they found out about a trust my mom left, and they are going to bleed it dry." Mrs. Rowan stood up. She walked to a small writing desk in the corner and pulled out a card. She wrote a name and a number on the back of it. "My niece," she said, handing it to me. "She is a social worker in Denver. She specializes in domestic coercive control. I already spoke to her, hypothetically." I looked at the card. Elena Rowan, LCSW. "I can't call her," I said. "Not yet. If they find out I talked to anyone, it will get worse." "You don't have to call her today," Mrs. Rowan said. "Just keep it. Hide it." She looked out the window at my house. A black SUV was pulling into the driveway. Shelby was home. "Go," Mrs. Rowan said. "Before she sees you are gone." I stood up. "Thank you." "Emery?" she called out as I reached the door. I turned back. "I keep my lights on," she said, "in the evening. But I made a change. I put a smart bulb in the porch light. If I hear shouting, if I hear anything that sounds wrong, I will turn the porch light on. Bright. It is my way of telling you that I am awake, that I am watching, and if you ever need to run, my back door is unlocked. Always." I nodded, my throat too tight to speak, and slipped out the door. I ran across the street just as Shelby was getting out of her car. "Where were you?" she asked, eyeing my wind-blown hair. "Just getting the mail," I lied, holding up a handful of junk mail I had grabbed from the box on my way in. "Well, hurry up," she snapped. "Daniel is bringing a guest for dinner. I need you to prep the tenderloin." The next 48 hours were a masterclass in psychological warfare. The guest turned out to be a financial advisor who spent the entire dinner talking about the tax benefits of gifting assets to family members. My father stared at me the whole time, his eyes drilling a hole in my forehead. I didn't break. I cleared the plates. I poured the wine. I played the part of the mute servant. But upstairs, in the dark of my room, I was building my arsenal. I started screenshotting every text message. "Cole, 3:14 p.m. Mom says you better not screw this up. I already told the guys I'm getting the X5. Shelby, 5:20 p.m. Don't forget who puts food in your mouth. Ungrateful girls end up with nothing." I uploaded them to the cloud. I recorded the dinner conversation where Daniel casually mentioned that legal guardianship can be extended for adults if they show signs of mental incompetence. It was a threat, a direct one. He was implying that if I didn't hand over the money, he would have me declared unfit to manage it. I felt a cold chill, but also a strange, detached satisfaction. Keep talking, I thought. Dig the hole deeper. That night, the shouting started around 10. I was in my room, but I could hear them downstairs. They weren't shouting at me. They were shouting about me. "She is stalling," Shelby screamed. "She is going to ruin everything." "I will handle her," Daniel roared back. "She is my daughter. I will break her if I have to." I crept to the window and looked out. Across the street, the porch light of the brick Victorian flicked on. It was a brilliant, piercing white LED. It cut through the darkness like a lighthouse beam. Mrs. Rowan was there. She heard them. I wasn't alone. I pulled out my journal, a digital one on my secret phone, and typed the date. My hands were steady now. The fear was still there, but it was being metabolized into fuel. Friday, October 14th. They think they are cornering a frightened animal. They don't realize they are walking into a trap. Halpern is ready. Mrs. Rowan is watching, and I am recording every word. I looked at the glowing screen, the blue light illuminating the scars on my emotional landscape. I closed the phone and hid it inside the hollow curtain rod. Downstairs, a glass shattered against the wall. The sound echoed through the house. I looked at the light across the street. It didn't flicker. It stayed on, steady and unblinking, a silent promise that when the explosion finally happened, there would be a witness to the fire. Saturday evening descended on Sycamore Lane, not with the soft, forgiving hues of twilight, but with the aggressive, artificial glare of rented floodlights. Shelby had decided that Cole's 22nd birthday was not merely a celebration of his birth. It was a branding activation, a public declaration of the Powell family supremacy that needed to be visible from space. The house had been transformed into something unrecognizable, a stage set designed to project wealth and harmony to an audience that was judging every single canapé. I stood in the kitchen, staring at my reflection in the stainless steel of the double oven. I was not wearing a party dress. I was wearing a simple black skirt and a white blouse, an outfit that Shelby had selected for me earlier that morning with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "It is elegant," she had said, handing me the hanger, "and functional. You are going to be busy tonight." Emery, we fired the catering staff for the floor service. I realized it was silly to pay strangers when family can help. It makes it more intimate, don't you think? It was not intimate. It was servitude. I was the help. Through the swinging door, I could hear the heavy bass of the DJ's music vibrating the floorboards. The house was packed with the elite of Ridgeview. There were local politicians, the senior partners from my father's firm, the women from the charity board who terrified everyone with their gossip, and a swarm of Cole's friends who all looked like they had been manufactured in a factory that specialized in perfect teeth and zero empathy. I picked up a heavy silver tray loaded with champagne flutes. My wrists ached, but the pain was distant, muffled by the adrenaline that had been coursing through my veins for the last 24 hours. They did not know. That was the thought that kept my hands steady as I arranged the glasses. As I pushed through the door and into the crushing noise of the living room, I held on to the secret like a physical weapon tucked inside my pocket. Yesterday morning, while Shelby was at her Pilates class and Daniel was in a partners meeting, I had driven to the credit union on the south side of town. I had sat in a small, gray cubicle with a loan officer named Brenda. I had handed her the paperwork for the trust, the paperwork my father thought was just a dead educational fund. I had initiated the transfer. It was not instant. The banking system moves with agonizing slowness. But the order was locked in. The entirety of the liquid assets, along with the stock certificates for Blue Cedar Analytics, were currently in a digital limbo, moving from the account my father monitored to an encrypted trust account that only I could access. If Daniel looked at the old account right now, he would see the balance. But if he tried to withdraw a single cent, or if he tried to write a check against it, the transaction would bounce so hard it would crack the ceiling. Tonight, he was expecting me to hand over a check for $72,000. He was expecting me to fund the down payment and the first 2 years of lease payments on a BMW X5 that was currently sitting 3 blocks away, hidden behind the community center, waiting for the grand reveal. I moved through the crowd, offering champagne. Faces I had known since childhood looked right through me. "Oh, thanks," a woman from the tennis club said. Taking a glass without making eye contact, she turned back to her friend. Can you believe the spread Shelby put on? And look at Cole. He looks like a movie star. Cole was holding court near the fireplace. He was wearing a velvet blazer that probably cost more than my car. He was laughing, throwing his head back, soaking in the adoration of 3 girls who were hanging on his every word. "Yeah, the scouts are coming next week," I heard him say, "but honestly, I am just focused on the game and the new wheels. Wait until you see what my sister got me. It is sick." I felt a hand on my lower back. It was not a caress. It was a steer. "Keep moving, Emery," Shelby whispered in my ear. She smelled of expensive Chardonnay and malice. "The ice bucket at the bar is low. And smile. You look like a funeral mute. This is a celebration." I turned to look at her. Her eyes were hard, glittering beads. "Happy birthday to Cole," I said flatly. "Don't test me tonight," she hissed, her smile never wavering for the guests watching us. "Your father is in a rare mood. Do not ruin this." I walked to the bar to refill the ice. My father was there, holding court with 2 men in suits. He saw me, and for the first time in years, he actually acknowledged my presence with something other than dismissal. He winked. "There she is," he boomed, putting an arm around my shoulder. I stiffened, but he held me tight, the best big sister in the world. Truly. He looked at his friends. You know how siblings are, usually fighting over the remote. But Emery? She knows the value of family. She is making a significant investment in her brother's future tonight. A very generous contribution. "That is commendable," one of the men said, nodding at me. "Good for you, young lady." "We are very proud," Daniel said, squeezing my shoulder. His fingers dug into my clavicle. "Now, run along, sweetie. We need more scotch over here." He released me. I walked away, my skin crawling where he had touched me. They were so confident. They had constructed a trap made of social pressure. They believed that by announcing the gift publicly, by attaching my name to it in front of the most important people in town, they would force me to comply. They thought I would be too ashamed to say no. They thought I would rather bankrupt myself than embarrass them. I walked into the kitchen and leaned against the counter, breathing hard. Through the window above the sink, I could see across the street. The darkness was absolute, except for one rectangle of light. Mrs. Rowan was there. She was standing in her front window. She wasn't hiding behind the curtains tonight. She was standing right in the center of the frame, illuminated by the lamp behind her. She was looking at my house. She was looking at the cars lining the street, the lights blazing from our windows, the shadows of people dancing. Even from this distance, I could feel her anxiety. She knew what tonight was. She knew the deadline was midnight. She was standing vigil. I wanted to wave to her. I wanted to signal. "It is okay. I have a plan." But I couldn't. "Emery!" Shelby's voice screeched from the hallway. "The cake! Now!" I took a deep breath. This was it. I carried the cake out. It was a 3-tiered monstrosity covered in gold fondant. The room went silent as I entered. The DJ cut the music. Happy Birthday began to play. A slow, jazzy version. I placed the cake on the central table. Cole stepped forward, looking like a prince claiming his throne. He blew out the candles to thunderous applause. Then, my father stepped into the center of the room. He held up a hand, and the room quieted down. He was a man who knew how to command silence. "Thank you all for coming," Daniel said, his voice rich and projecting to the back of the room. "It means the world to Shelby and me to have our community here. 22 years ago, this young man came into the world. And look at him now." Applause. Cole did a mock bow. "We have watched him grow into a scholar and an athlete," Daniel continued. "But more than that, we have watched this family grow closer. We have had our challenges, like everyone, but we have come through them with love, and tonight, we have a very special demonstration of that love." My heart began to hammer against my ribs. It was a slow, heavy rhythm. Thump, thump, thump. Daniel turned his gaze toward me. He smiled. It was the smile of a hunter who has the deer in his sights. "Emery," he said, "come here, sweetheart." Every head in the room turned toward me. I was standing near the kitchen door, holding a dirty napkin. I felt stripped naked by their stares. I didn't move. Shelby appeared at my elbow. She hooked her arm through mine. It looked like a supportive gesture, but her grip was iron. She pulled me forward. I had no choice but to walk or create a scene right then and there. She marched me to the center of the room, positioning me between her and Daniel. We were a tableau of the happy family. As many of you know, Daniel said, addressing the crowd, Cole needs reliable transportation for his recruitment tour. Shelby and I wanted to get him something safe. But Emery insisted on doing something special. He looked at me, his eyes shining with triumph. She came to us last week and said, "Dad, I want to use my trust fund. I want to buy Cole his dream car." She said, "He deserves it." A collective awe rippled through the room. "And she didn't just get him any car," Daniel said, his voice rising to a crescendo. "She got him the new BMW X5. The room erupted. Cole whooped and punched the air. People were clapping, whistling. "It is parked just down the street," Daniel shouted over the noise. "We have a driver bringing it around to the front door in exactly 5 minutes for the official handover of the keys." He turned to me. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He handed it to me. "Here are the keys. Emery," he said loudly, "for everyone to hear. Why don't you say a few words to your brother before you give them to him?" He shoved the microphone into my hand. The weight of the room collapsed on me. The applause died down, replaced by an expectant silence. They were waiting for the speech. They were waiting for the "I love you." They were waiting for the checkbook to open. I held the microphone. My hand was trembling, but not from fear. It was trembling from the sheer, kinetic energy of the rage that I had been suppressing for 7 years. Shelby leaned in close to me, pretending to fix my hair. Her fingers dug into the soft flesh of my upper arm, pinching so hard I felt the bruise forming instantly. "Smile," she whispered, her voice a razor blade wrapped in silk. "Smile and give him the keys. If you embarrass this family, you will not survive the night." I looked at her. I looked at the fake concern on her face. I looked at Cole, who was grinning like a shark. His hand already reached out to take the keys he believed were his birthright. I looked at my father, who was watching me with a smug, self-satisfied expression, convinced he had maneuvered me into a corner I could not escape. And then I looked past them, through the large bay window at the front of the house. Across the street, Mrs. Rowan was still standing there, but she had moved closer to the glass. Her hands were pressed against her mouth. She wasn't just watching anymore. She was squinting. She was leaning forward. She saw Shelby's hand gripping my arm. She saw the rigid tension in my neck. She saw the look in my eyes that the guests were too drunk on champagne to notice. Mrs. Rowan's eyes narrowed. She dropped her hands from her mouth. She reached into the pocket of her housecoat. She knew. She saw the violence hidden in the celebration. She saw that the girl in the black dress wasn't a generous sister. She was a hostage being paraded for applause. I looked back at the microphone in my hand. I looked at the keys. I took a breath. The air tasted of stale perfume and lies. Shelby squeezed my arm harder, her nails breaking the skin. "Do it," she hissed. I lifted the microphone to my lips. "I have something to say," I said. My voice was steady. It was the voice of someone who had already walked through the fire and burned away everything that could be hurt. Mrs. Rowan pulled her phone out of her pocket. The trap was sprung, but they were the ones standing on the X. I looked Daniel dead in the eye. "There is no car," I said. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. It was the sound of a perfect world cracking open, and in that silence, I saw the first flicker of true, unadulterated fear in my father's eyes. He realized, 1 second too late, that the check was going to bounce. Shelby's grip tightened until I thought my bone would snap, but I didn't flinch. I smiled, and it was the only real smile in the room. "Let me clarify," I said into the microphone, "there is no car, and there never will be." Across the street, Mrs. Rowan's thumb hovered over the keypad. She was ready. And so was I. The party was over. The war had begun. The silence that followed my declaration was not empty. It was heavy, suffocating, and thick with the sudden, violent death of a lie. I stood there, the microphone still gripped in my hand, feeling the vibration of my own voice fading into the stunned air of the living room. The words, "There is no car," seemed to hang suspended above the crowd like smoke. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. My father, Daniel, stood with his mouth slightly open. The smug, triumphant smile that had been plastered on his face a moment ago was beginning to slide off, replaced by a flicker of genuine confusion. He blinked. Once, twice, his brain struggling to process a deviation from the script he had so carefully written. In his world, people did what he told them to do. Daughters obeyed. Money flowed upward. The idea that I would stand in front of his partners, his clients, and his social circle and defy him was a glitch in his reality. Shelby recovered first. Her survival instinct was faster than his. She let out a laugh. It was a high, brittle sound that shattered against the crystal glasses held by the frozen guests. "Oh, Emery," she trilled, her voice pitching up 2 octaves. She squeezed my arm again, her nails digging so deep I felt the sharp sting of skin breaking. "You have such a wicked sense of humor. Always the joker. She is teasing you. Cole, the car is probably just delayed in traffic. Tell them you are joking, sweetie." She leaned into me, her breath hot against my ear. "Fix this," she hissed, her voice so low only I could hear it. "Fix this right now, or I will make sure you never wake up tomorrow." I looked at her. I looked at the desperation in her eyes. It was the look of a woman watching her carefully constructed facade of perfection crumble into dust. I pulled my arm away from her grip. I stepped back, creating a physical distance between us. I raised the microphone again. "I am not joking," I said. My voice was loud, amplified by the speakers, booming into every corner of the house. "There is no car. There is no surprise gift. I did not buy a BMW for Cole." The murmuring started then, a low wave of whispers rippling through the crowd. "What is happening? Is this part of the show?" She looked serious. Cole stepped forward. His face, usually so handsome and assured, was twisted into an ugly mask of entitlement. He looked like a toddler who had been told Christmas was canceled. "What are you talking about?" he shouted. He didn't need a microphone. His voice was raw with panic and rage. "Dad said you bought it. You have the trust fund. You have the money." "The money is mine," I said, turning to face him. "It was left to me by my mother. It is for my education. It is for my life. It is not for you to drive around town pretending to be rich." "You selfish bitch!" Cole screamed. He threw his drink on the floor. The glass shattered, sending shards of crystal and amber liquid spraying across the polished hardwood. The crowd gasped. The veneer of the polite cocktail party evaporated instantly. Daniel stepped toward me. His face was no longer confused. It was dark, suffused with blood, turning a dangerous shade of purple. The veins in his neck were bulging against his starch-collared shirt. "Emery," he warned, his voice a low rumble of thunder. "Put the microphone down. You are drunk. You are embarrassing yourself." "I am stone-cold sober," I said. "And for the first time in my life, I am telling the truth. You wanted a show? You wanted to show everyone how generous the Powell family is? Fine, let's tell them." I turned to the guests. I saw the shock on their faces. I saw the mayor's wife covering her mouth. I saw my father's business partner frowning, putting down his drink. "My father and stepmother have been trying to force me to sign over my inheritance for weeks," I said. The words poured out of me, unstoppable. "They threatened to kick me out. They threatened to have me declared mentally incompetent. They treated me like a servant in my own home so they could buy a luxury car for a son who has never worked a day in his life." "That is enough," Daniel roared. He lunged for the microphone. I stepped back, dodging his hand. "My mother, Margaret Powell, worked for that money," I shouted. She didn't leave it to buy status symbols for the people who erased her memory from this house. It is over. Dad, I transferred the funds yesterday. You can't touch a dime. It is gone. That was the trigger. The moment I said, "It is gone," something inside Daniel snapped. I saw it happen. It was like a cable parting under too much tension. The civilized businessman, the pillar of the community, the man who cared more about image than anything else, vanished. In his place was a monster fueled by humiliation and loss of control. Everything seemed to slow down. I saw his arm draw back. I saw the heavy gold watch on his wrist catch the light of the chandelier. I saw the dust motes dancing in the air between us. I saw the horrified expression of the woman in the red dress standing behind him. I knew I should run. I knew I should duck. But I was frozen by the sheer inevitability of it. This moment had been building for 7 years. Every silent dinner, every passive-aggressive comment, every act of erasure had been leading to this singular explosion of violence. I didn't close my eyes. I wanted to see him do it. His hand connected with the side of my face with the force of a sledgehammer. Crack. The sound was sickeningly loud. It wasn't the sound of a movie slap. It was the wet, meaty sound of bone hitting flesh. The force of the blow lifted me off my feet. The microphone flew from my hand, clattering across the floor with a screech of feedback that pierced the ears of everyone in the room. I spun around, the world tilting sideways. My vision went white, then red. I crashed onto the hardwood floor, my hip taking the brunt of the impact. For a second, there was absolute silence. No music, no whispers, just the ringing in my ears and the ragged sound of my own breath. I tasted copper. Warm blood filled my mouth. I touched my lip and my fingers came away red. I looked up. My father was standing over me, his chest heaving. His hand was still raised, trembling. He looked at his palm, then at me, as if he couldn't quite believe what he had done. But there was no regret in his eyes, only a cold, terrifying fury. "You ungrateful little brat," he spat. The guests were paralyzed. The bystander effect was in full force. These were polite people from the suburbs. They did not know what to do with raw violence. They stared. They shifted their weight. But nobody moved to help me. Except Shelby. But she didn't come to help. She dropped to her knees beside me. She grabbed my shoulders, her fingers digging into the bruises she had already made. She shook me, her head whipping back and forth so her perfectly styled hair flew around her face. "Look what you did," she screamed in my face. "Look what you made him do. You ruined everything. Why couldn't you just sign the check? Why do you have to be so difficult?" Her eyes were wild. She wasn't seeing me. She was seeing the scandal. She was seeing the whispers at the country club. She was seeing her social standing evaporating. "This is your fault," she hissed, leaning close, her spittle landing on my cheek. "You provoked him. You made him crazy. Nobody will believe you. We will tell them you attacked us. We will tell them you were on drugs." I tried to push her away, but my head was swimming. The room was spinning in a nauseating circle. I looked past Shelby's shoulder. Cole was standing there. He wasn't horrified. He wasn't trying to stop his parents. He was holding up his phone. He was recording. But he wasn't recording to help me. I could see the sneer on his face. He was angling the camera to catch me on the floor, bleeding, with his mother screaming at me. "Psycho sister finally snapped," he muttered, narrating for his future audience. "Look at her. Total meltdown." They were going to bury me. They were going to take this moment, this assault, and twist it until I was the villain. They were going to edit the footage, control the narrative, and lock me away. Despair washed over me, cold and black. I was alone. I was on the floor, surrounded by enemies, with a room full of cowards watching me bleed. But then, I saw the window. From where I lay on the floor, I had a direct line of sight through the front bay window, past the frozen guests, out into the night. Across the street, the porch light of the brick Victorian house was blazing. It was a beacon in the darkness. And in the window, Mrs. Rowan was moving. She wasn't just watching anymore. She had seen the slap. She had seen my father strike me down. She had seen the violence that the rest of the neighborhood pretended didn't exist. She was holding her phone to her ear. Her other hand was pressed against the glass. Her fingers splayed wide. She was speaking rapidly, her mouth moving in urgent, decisive shapes. 911. She hadn't hesitated. She hadn't worried about being polite. She hadn't worried about minding her own business. She had made the call. "Get up," Daniel shouted, reaching down to grab my arm. "Get up and go to your room before I give you something to really cry about." He yanked me upward. I cried out as pain shot through my shoulder. "Let her go," a man's voice said from the crowd. Mr. Henderson, one of the partners. He finally stepped forward, looking pale. "Daniel, stop. You have gone too far." "Stay out of this." "Bob," Daniel snarled, not letting go of my arm. "This is a family matter. She is hysterical. She needs to be controlled." "She is bleeding." "Daniel," Mr. Henderson said. "She bit her lip," Shelby lied instantly, standing up and smoothing her dress. "She fell. She is so clumsy when she drinks." "I didn't drink," I screamed, spitting blood onto the white rug. "He hit me. You all saw it." "Shut up," Cole yelled, stepping closer with the phone. "Stop lying." The chaos was reaching a fever pitch. Daniel was dragging me toward the stairs. Shelby was trying to usher guests toward the patio, babbling about coffee and cake. Cole was filming. I dug my heels into the carpet. I wasn't going to the second floor. If they got me upstairs, behind closed doors, I didn't know if I would come back down. "Help me," I screamed at the crowd. "Call the police." "Nobody is calling the police," Daniel said, his grip crushing my bicep. "We are going to have a long talk. Emery, a very long talk." And then we heard it. It started as a low wail in the distance, but it grew louder with terrifying speed. Whoop whoop, wee-oo, wee-oo. The sound cut through the music, through the shouting, through the lies. My father froze. His hand went slack on my arm. He turned toward the front door. Blue and red lights exploded against the living room walls. They flashed through the bay window, painting the horrified faces of the guests in strobe light colors. One car, then two, then three. The sirens killed the engine as they screeched to a halt in the driveway, but the lights kept spinning. I slumped to the floor, my legs finally giving out. I looked through the window one last time. Mrs. Rowan was still standing there. She hadn't moved. She was watching the police officers swarm up my driveway. She was watching the end of the Powell family dynasty. She met my eyes across the distance. She didn't smile. She just nodded. One slow, solemn nod. "I saw you," she was saying. "I believed you." The front door burst open. "Police!" a voice shouted. "Everybody stay where you are." I closed my eyes and let the darkness take me. The sound of heavy boots running on hardwood sounding like the most beautiful music I had ever heard. The fluorescent lights of the emergency room hummed with a frequency that seemed to drill directly into my fractured world. I was lying on a gurney, separated from the chaos of the hallway by a thin pastel curtain. My face felt heavy, distorted, as if it belonged to someone else. Every time I swallowed, the taste of copper flooded the back of my throat. A doctor was standing over me, scribbling on a clipboard. He was young, with tired eyes and a name tag that read, Dr. Evans. He looked at the bruising on my cheekbone, then at the split in my lip, and finally at the purple fingerprints blossoming on my upper arm like dark orchids. "I am documenting everything. Emery," he said quietly. His pen scratched against the paper, a sound that felt louder than the heart monitor. Contusions consistent with blunt force trauma, defensive bruising on the deltoids, laceration to the inner mucosa. I am marking this as suspected domestic violence against an adult. This record is permanent. It goes to the police. Do you understand? I nodded. The movement sent a spike of pain through my neck, but I did not stop. For years, I had hidden bruises with concealer and long sleeves. I had protected the family reputation with my silence. Now, I wanted the ink to dry. I wanted it to be indelible. The curtain swept back, and a police officer stepped in. She was a woman in her 40s, sturdy and sharp-eyed, with her hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her badge said Vega. "Ms. Powell," Officer Vega said, pulling a chair close to the bed. She did not look at me with pity. She looked at me with professional intensity. "I am the responding officer. I need to take your statement. I know you are hurting, but I need you to tell me exactly what happened tonight." I looked at the ceiling tiles. I thought about the family meeting at the dining table. I thought about the BMW brochure. I thought about Shelby's nails digging into my arm. "I want to report a crime," I whispered. My voice was raspy. "My father, Daniel Powell. He hit me. He knocked me down." Officer Vega nodded, her pen moving swiftly. "We know. We have witnesses." "You do?" I asked. "Your neighbor," Vega said. "Mrs. Rowan. She called 911 while the assault was in progress. She gave a sworn statement on the scene. She saw your stepmother holding you. She saw your father strike you. She described the blow perfectly consistent with your injuries." Mrs. Rowan, the woman across the street, the silent watcher. She had not just called, she had testified. "And," Vega continued, a grim satisfaction entering her voice, "we have video evidence." I froze. "Cole?" "Your stepbrother," she confirmed. "He was very eager to show us the footage. He kept shouting that you were having a psychotic break and that he had filmed your meltdown for proof. He handed his phone to my partner." I almost laughed, but it hurt too much. Cole, arrogant, stupid Cole. "He didn't realize what he was filming," Vega said, shaking her head. "He thought he was filming you being difficult. What he actually filmed was your father standing over you with a raised fist. He filmed your stepmother shaking you while you were bleeding on the floor. He filmed you begging for help while the guests stood there doing nothing. He handed us the smoking gun. Ms. Powell, we seized the phone as evidence." "Where are they?" I asked. "Your father is in custody," Vega said, "booking him for assault and battery. Your stepmother is being questioned for accessory and witness intimidation. The party is over." I closed my eyes. The relief was physical. A wave of cold water washing over a burn. They were not at the country club. They were not spinning the story. They were in a holding cell, stripping off their expensive jewelry and handing over their shoelaces. "I want to tell you everything," I said, opening my eyes. "It wasn't just tonight. It has been years. The financial control, the coercion, the threats." "Tell me," Vega said. And I did. I vomited the truth. I told her about the forced labor. I told her about my paycheck being stolen. I told her about the rent that wasn't rent. I told her about the trust and the ultimatum to buy the car. I told her about the threats Shelby made in the laundry room. I told her about the recording I had made of that threat. And I gave her the password to the cloud account where I had stored it. By the time I finished, a social worker named Sarah had joined us. She listened, her face hardening with every sentence. "This is textbook coercive control," Sarah said. "Economic abuse combined with physical intimidation. We are going to file for an emergency protective order immediately. They will not be allowed within 500 feet of you." Then, the curtain opened again. Arthur Halpern stood there. He was wearing a raincoat over his pajamas, looking disheveled but terrifyingly awake. He carried a leather briefcase that looked like a weapon of war. "Emery," he said, his voice thick with emotion. He looked at my face, and his jaw tightened. "I came as soon as I heard. The police called me." He turned to Officer Vega. "I am her attorney. I will handle the legal interfacing from here." He turned back to me and opened the briefcase. He pulled out a sheaf of documents that I recognized. They were the papers we had reviewed in his office. "I spoke to the precinct," Halpern said. "I have a copy of the preliminary police report. I have the witness statement from Mrs. Rowan confirming the assault. And I have the medical report Dr. Evans just filed." He placed a single sheet of paper on the tray table over my legs. It was a letter from the bank that held the trust. "The hardship clause," Halpern announced. "It is done." I looked at the paper. "What does that mean?" I asked. It means the trigger condition has been met, Halpern said. Documented physical abuse and police intervention. As of 1 hour ago, the trust is no longer a conditional asset. It is fully vested. The trusteeship of Daniel Powell is dissolved for cause. You have sole, unrestricted access to the principal, the interest, and the equity portfolio. He leaned in closer. The 15% stake in Blue Cedar Analytics? It is yours. The cash reserves? Yours. Your father cannot touch a penny. In fact, because he is now facing criminal charges for assaulting the beneficiary. I have already filed a motion to freeze his own assets to prevent him from hiding family money before the inevitable civil suit. Civil suit? Oh, yes, Halpern said, a shark-like grin appearing. We are going to sue him for every dime he stole from your wages over the last 4 years. We are going to sue for pain and suffering. We are going to sue for emotional distress. By the time I'm done with Daniel and Shelby, they won't be able to afford a lawyer, let alone a BMW. He handed me a thick black envelope. This was in the safe at the bank, he said. Your mother left instructions for this to be issued the moment the clause was activated. I opened it. Inside was a heavy black metal debit card. It had my name on it, Emery Powell. No cosigner, no oversight. How much is on it? I asked sad. Halpern adjusted his glasses. The Blue Cedar stock split 3 times since your mother died. The dividends have been reinvesting automatically. The liquid cash available to you right now is just over $4 million. The stock value is significantly higher. $4 million. I looked at the plastic card in my hand. It weighed almost nothing, but it felt heavier than the entire house on Sycamore Lane. They don't know yet, do they? I asked. No, Halpern said. They are sitting in a cell thinking they can bail themselves out in the morning and bully you into dropping the charges. They think they still have the power. They don't know they are bankrupt. I lay back against the pillow. The pain in my cheek was still there, throbbing in time with my pulse. But something had changed. The fear was gone. The crushing weight of their expectations was gone. Back on Sycamore Lane, the flashing lights would be gone by now. The guests would have driven away, frantically texting each other the gossip of the century. The house would be dark, empty for the first time in years. I imagined Mrs. Rowan across the street. She was probably sitting in her front parlor, sipping tea, watching the empty house. She had done it. She had saved me. But I had saved myself too. I had said no. I looked at the debit card again. Daniel had slapped me to silence me. He had slapped me to put me back in my place, to make me the servant, the bank, the victim. He had raised his hand to crush me into submission. But he had miscalculated. That slap was the key. That slap was the final signature required on the legal document he had spent 7 years trying to hide. He had tried to break me, and in doing so, he had handed me the hammer to shatter his entire world. Mr. Halpern, I said, sitting up. The room spun, but I steadied myself. I don't want to go back to that house, ever. You don't have to, Halpern said. I have already booked you a suite at the Ritz-Carlton for tonight. Tomorrow, we will look for an apartment, a penthouse, if you like. And Shelby? I asked. Shelby will likely be charged with witness tampering and assault. Officer Vega interjected from the corner. And with your father's assets frozen, she is going to find it very difficult to maintain her lifestyle. The neighbors are already talking. Ms. Powell. I took statements from 6 people who saw everything. The perfect family image is dead. I touched my swollen lip. It hurt, but it was a clean pain. It was the pain of surgery, the pain of removing a tumor that had been killing me slowly. Let's go, I said. I swung my legs off the bed. My dress was torn, and there was dried blood on my collar. I looked like a victim. But as I stood up, clutching the black card in my hand, I knew the truth. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the CEO of my own life, and I had just fired the entire board of directors. The courtroom smelled of lemon polish and stale anxiety. It was a smell I had associated with fear for most of my life, but today, Sitting at the plaintiff's table next to Mr. Halpern, it smelled like justice. My father, Daniel, sat across the aisle. He was wearing his charcoal power suit, the one he reserved for closing mergers and intimidating junior partners. But today, the shoulders seemed too broad for him. He looked shrunken, his skin a sallow gray under the harsh fluorescent lights. Shelby sat beside him, wearing a demure navy dress and a pearl necklace, her hands clasped in a performance of aggrieved piousness. She looked like a mother mourning a wayward child, not a woman who had threatened to erase my existence in a laundry room. Cole was not there. He was hiding at a friend's house, dodging the internet storm he had created. "All rise," the bailiff announced. The hearing for the permanent restraining order was supposed to be a formality, but Daniel's defense team had decided to fight. They wanted to paint me as the aggressor. They wanted to salvage his reputation by destroying mine one last time. It was a mistake. "Your Honor," Daniel's lawyer began, pacing the floor. He was a slick man with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "The events of last Saturday were tragic. Yes, but they were the result of extreme provocation. Ms. Powell has a history of emotional instability. She staged a public scene to humiliate her family. My client, under extreme duress, reacted defensively. It was a singular lapse in judgment, not a pattern of abuse." Mr. Halpern didn't even stand up. He simply tapped the spacebar on his laptop. The large screen mounted on the wall flickered to life. It was the video. Cole's video. The audio boomed through the courtroom speakers, distorted but undeniable. "There is no car," my voice rang out, strong and defiant. Then came the scream from Cole. The image panned to Daniel's face. Red, contorted, monstrous. The entire court watched in silence as the pillar of the Ridgeview community raised his hand and struck his daughter with enough force to knock her off her feet. Crack. The sound echoed in the silent room. I saw the judge, a stern woman with glasses perched on the end of her nose, flinch. Then the video continued. It showed me on the floor, bleeding. It showed Shelby shaking me, screaming, "This is your fault." It showed Daniel standing over me, fists clenched, looking ready to strike again. Mr. Halpern paused the video on the frame of Daniel's raised fist. "A singular lapse in judgment?" Halpern asked, his voice slicing through the air. "Your Honor, we would like to submit Exhibit B and C. These are audio recordings taken by my client over the last 2 weeks, and Exhibit D, a log of text messages sent by Mrs. Powell." He played the laundry room recording. "If you embarrass this family, you will not survive the night." Shelby's voice filled the room, cold and venomous. I saw her stiffen in her seat. She stared straight ahead, her knuckles white. Then Halpern projected the financial records. "For 4 years," Halpern said, addressing the judge, "this family confiscated 100% of Ms. Powell's earnings. They forced her to live in a guest room while buying luxury items for their son. They attempted to coerce her into liquidating a protected trust to purchase a $70,000 vehicle. This was not a lapse, Your Honor. This was a systemic, predatory campaign of financial and physical abuse designed to break my client." Daniel's lawyer tried to object, stammering something about context, but the judge raised her hand. "Sit down, counselor," she said. Her voice was ice. She looked at Daniel. For the first time, he couldn't meet someone's gaze. He looked at his expensive Italian loafers. "Mr. Powell," the judge said, "I have sat on this bench for 20 years. I have seen many things, but rarely have I seen such a callous disregard for the welfare of one's own child. You treated your daughter not as a human being, but as an asset to be liquidated." She banged her gavel. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. "The permanent protective order is granted. 5 years. Mr. Powell and Mrs. Ross are strictly prohibited from contacting the plaintiff, directly or indirectly. They are prohibited from coming within 500 feet of her residence or place of employment. Furthermore, given the financial evidence presented, I am freezing all personal assets of the defendants pending the outcome of the civil litigation Halpern has filed. Daniel's head snapped up. You can't freeze my assets. I have business to conduct. You should have thought about that before you assaulted a witness, the judge said. Court is adjourned. The fall of the House of Powell was swift, brutal, and public. It started before we even left the courthouse. The video Cole had filmed, the one he thought would prove I was crazy, had been seized by the police, but a version of it filmed by a guest had leaked online. It had gone viral. By Tuesday morning, the hashtag Sycamore Lane was trending, but the internet, in its chaotic justice, did not side with the handsome basketball star. They saw a rich, entitled brat filming his sister being beaten. Cole lost his scholarship offer within 48 hours. The university issued a statement saying his values did not align with their athletic program. The comments on his Instagram were so vitriolic, he had to delete his account. He went from being the town's golden boy to a social pariah. Then came the blow to Daniel. Blue Cedar Analytics, the company my mother had helped build, the company where I now held a controlling 15% interest thanks to the trust, called an emergency board meeting. Mr. Halpern attended on my behalf. He delivered a simple message. I would not support a leadership team that harbored a violent criminal. The board didn't even vote. They demanded Daniel's resignation for gross violation of the ethics clause. He was escorted out of the building by security, holding a cardboard box containing his stapler and a photo of Shelby. He lost his salary, his stock options, and his reputation. And Shelby. The social hierarchy of Ridgeview is ruthless. It is built on perception, and Shelby's perception was shattered. The charity committee voted to remove her as chairwoman. The country club suspended their membership due to conduct unbecoming. When she walked into the grocery store, women she had known for years turned their carts down other aisles. She had spent a decade curating an image of perfection, and I had burned it down in a single night. 3 days after the hearing, I returned to Sycamore Lane. I didn't go alone. Officer Vega drove me in her cruiser, and 2 movers followed in a truck. I had the legal right to retrieve my personal belongings and my mother's heirlooms. The house looked different. The lawn was still manicured. The white pillars were still imposing, but the energy was gone. It looked like a stage set after the actors had quit. Officer Vega knocked on the door. Shelby answered. She was wearing a bathrobe at 2 p.m. Her hair was unwashed, pulled back in a messy knot. She looked 10 years older. Her eyes were red and swollen. She saw me standing behind the officer, and her face twisted into a snarl. "You," she spat. "Step aside, Mrs. Ross," Officer Vega said, her hand resting near her belt. "We are here pursuant to a court order. Do not interfere." Shelby stepped back, shrinking against the wall. I walked into the house. It was silent. The furniture was still there. The crystal chandelier was still there, but it felt hollow. It was a tomb. I went upstairs to the guest room. I packed quickly. My clothes, my books, the few photos I had hidden of my mother. Then I went to the master bedroom. Daniel was sitting in the armchair by the window, staring out at the street. He didn't look at me. He held a glass of scotch, his hand trembling slightly. He was a king without a kingdom, ruling over a pile of ashes. I didn't say a word to him. He wasn't worth my breath. I took the jewelry box from the vanity, the one that had belonged to my mother, the one Shelby had claimed was lost years ago. I found it in the back of her drawer. I walked back downstairs. The movers were loading the last box. Shelby was waiting for me in the foyer. She was trembling, vibrating with a mix of rage and terror. "Are you happy?" she screamed, her voice cracking. "Look at this. Look at what you did. Daniel lost his job. Cole's life is ruined. We are going to lose the house." She took a step toward me, but Officer Vega stepped in between us. "You destroyed this family," Shelby shrieked, tears streaming down her face. "We gave you everything, and you destroyed us." I stopped at the door. I turned around and looked at her. I looked at the woman who had made me feel small for 6 years. I looked at the woman who had turned my father into a stranger. She looked pathetic. I didn't destroy this family, Shelby, I said. My voice was calm, steady, and cold. This family was destroyed the day you decided I wasn't a daughter, but a mobile bank. You destroyed it every time you chose money over love. You destroyed it. I just turned on the lights so everyone else could see the wreckage. I turned my back on her. I walked out the front door and down the steps. The air outside was crisp and clean. Across the street, Mrs. Rowan was on her porch. She wasn't hiding. She was sweeping. The rhythmic swish-swish of her broom the only sound on the street. She stopped when she saw me. She leaned on the broom handle. She looked at the police car. She looked at the moving truck, and then she looked at me. She smiled. It was a real smile, crinkling the corners of her eyes. She raised her hand in a wave. I waved back. "Thank you," I mouthed. She nodded, then went back to sweeping. She was the guardian of the street, and her watch over me was finally over. I got into the passenger seat of Officer Vega's car. "Where to?" she asked. "The city," I said. "I leased a new place this morning, downtown." As we drove away, I watched the house on Sycamore Lane disappear in the side mirror. I watched the white pillars, the perfect lawn, and the prison of expectations shrink until they were nothing more than a speck in the distance. I touched the pocket of my jacket. My mother's necklace was there. Safe. The black bank card was there. Safe. I was leaving behind the ghosts. I was leaving behind the silence. I moved into my new apartment an hour later. It was on the 15th floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city skyline. It was empty, echoing, and completely mine. I stood by the window as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the urban sprawl. The light flooded the room, turning the white walls gold. I took a deep breath. My ribs still ached, and the bruise on my face was fading from purple to yellow. A map of the violence I had survived. But pain is just a signal. It tells you you are still alive. I thought about Daniel, sitting in his dark room. I thought about Shelby, screaming at the walls. I thought about Cole, refreshing his feed, waiting for validation that would never come. They were stuck in the story of their own making. They were characters in a tragedy of greed. But me? I pressed my hand against the warm glass of the window. From here, the story isn't about what they did to me. It isn't about the bruises or the stolen money or the years of silence. It is about what I choose for myself. I turned away from the window and looked at the empty room, ready to be filled. "Time to start," I whispered. And for the first time in 22 years, the silence wasn't empty. It was full of peace. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It has been a long journey from the shadows of Sycamore Lane to the light of my new life, and I am grateful you walked this path with me. I would love to know where you are listening from. Are you safe in your own space, or are you fighting your own battles? Please leave a comment below and share your thoughts. Let's build a community where no one has to suffer in silence. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and smash that hype button so this story can reach more people who might need to hear it. You are never as alone as you think. Stay strong.